She'll never afford a house. She can barely afford lunch, my father announced to 40 guests at my own birthday party, and the table laughed. He was standing at the head of the table, wineglass raised, grinning like he'd just told the world's best joke. And maybe, to him, it was. My boyfriend Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just looked my father in the eye and smiled. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 8 years preparing for exactly this moment. Not for revenge, for the truth. And the truth was sitting in my coat pocket, a set of keys to a house he drives past every single day. But the keys were only part of it. What came after? What my aunt pulled from her purse? What my mother had written years before she died? That's the part that made his face go white. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always love reading those. I'm Myra. I just turned 30. Now let me take you back to where this really started. 8 years ago, the week my mother was buried. The house smelled like casseroles and lilies. That's what I remember most about the week we buried my mother. How everyone kept bringing food nobody ate and flowers that made me sneeze. I was 22. Helen Lawson, my mom, had fought ovarian cancer for 14 months, and she lost on a Tuesday in March. The funeral was packed. My father, Gerald, sat in the front pew shaking hands like a mayor at a ribbon cutting. He cried exactly twice, both times when someone was watching. Brenda, my older sister, stayed pressed against his side. He held her, stroked her hair, told her everything would be okay. I washed dishes in the kitchen, not because anyone asked, because no one thought to tell me to stop. That Friday, Dad called a family meeting. Just the 3 of us, at the dining table where Mom used to set 4 plates. Your mother handled the soft stuff, he said. I handle the money. From now on, things are going to be more structured. Structured meant this. Brenda would keep receiving her monthly allowance, her car insurance payment, her tuition reimbursement. Brenda had a plan. Brenda was in grad school. Me? I'd just finished a 2-year associate's degree and was working the front desk at an insurance office for $31,000 a year. You need to figure yourself out first, Dad said. Not cruel, not loud, just final. I nodded. What else could I do? That night I went down to the basement to grab a box of Mom's old sweaters, and behind the water heater, tucked against the wall, I found a small cardboard box labeled Helen, Personal, in my mother's handwriting. Dad told us he'd thrown everything out. I took the box. I didn't open it. I just held it in the car and drove home. The next 2 years moved like a time lapse of someone else's life getting better while mine stood still. Brenda turned 26 and Dad bought her a silver Audi, a graduation gift for finishing her MBA. She posted the photo. 93 likes. Dad commented a heart emoji. Brenda turned 27 and Dad covered the down payment on a townhouse 15 minutes from his place. Every girl deserves a safe place to land, he told the family at Easter. I was working 2 jobs by then. Front desk at the insurance office until 5. Bartending at a place called Rosie's until midnight. I lived in a shared apartment with 2 strangers who left hair in the drain and played music until 2 a.m. My half of the rent was $480. At every family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, somebody's birthday, Dad would find a way to mention me. Myra's still figuring things out. Not everyone blooms at the same speed, right? He'd say it with a sad little smile, like he was being generous, like he was rooting for me. And every aunt, every uncle, every cousin would nod with that look. The tilted head, the soft eyes. Poor Myra. Then the whispers started. I'd hear them secondhand. Is she okay? Gerald says things are tough. And my father would lean in, voice low, noble. I've been helping, quietly. He wasn't. I found out the truth by accident. A thank you card from my Aunt Donna arrived at Dad's house, forwarded to me by mistake. So glad the money I sent Gerald is helping you with rent, sweetheart. Hang in there. I had never received a cent from Donna. Not one. I read the card 3 times. Then I put it in the same drawer as my mother's box. I didn't start building because of my father. I started because I was tired of standing still. At 23, I enrolled in an online bookkeeping certificate, $40 a month, self-paced. I studied on my phone between insurance calls. I practiced on spreadsheets during slow nights at Rosie's when the bar was dead. Turns out I'm good with numbers, not genius level. Just steady, careful. The kind of person who checks a column 3 times before moving on. I picked up freelance bookkeeping clients, a nail salon, a landscaping company, a guy who sold vintage guitars on the internet, $20 an hour, then 30. By 24, my freelance income passed my insurance salary. I quit the bar. Nobody in my family noticed. Dad still told people I was bartending. At her age, he'd say, shaking his head. I let him. Then I started researching real estate. Not because I had some master plan, because a podcast I listened to on the bus mentioned house hacking, and I thought, I'm already living with strangers. At least I could own the place. I spent 6 months going to open houses on Saturdays, learning neighborhoods, reading inspection reports for fun. At 25, I bought my first property, a duplex on Greenfield Avenue, 20 minutes outside the city. $87,000. FHA loan, 3.5% down. The kitchen had water damage and the carpet smelled like a wet dog. I painted every room myself. I watched YouTube tutorials and fixed the leaking sink. I rented the other half to a nurse named Claudia, who paid on time every single month. The rental income covered my mortgage. All of it. I didn't tell Brenda. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't hide my life to plan some grand reveal. I hid it because every time I shared something good, he found a way to make it small. I was 27 when my father tried to blow up my career. I'd just been promoted to Senior Administrative Coordinator at the insurance company. New title, small raise, my own desk near the window. It was the first time in 5 years I'd felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken away. Then my boss, Linda, called me into her office on a Wednesday afternoon. She closed the door. That's how I knew. Your father called, she said. He expressed concern about your mental state. He asked us to keep an eye on you. I sat there very still while the walls got closer. He said you've been struggling since your mother passed. He said you put on a brave face, but... She trailed off. I'm required to flag it. It took me 3 weeks to clear it. 3 meetings with HR. A wellness evaluation I didn't need. A form I signed promising I had no current mental health crisis. All because my father picked up a phone and performed concern to a stranger. I almost lost the promotion. They almost put me on a monitoring plan. That night I sat in my car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from sadness, from something hotter. He knew I was doing better, and he couldn't stand it. I drove home and opened the closet where I kept my mother's box. I'd been carrying it for 5 years and hadn't once looked inside. That night, I sat on the bed and pulled the tape off the lid. Inside, her gold-plated earrings, a faded photo from her college graduation, a recipe card for banana bread, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope with my name on it, in her handwriting. I picked it up, ran my thumb across the ink. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Thanksgiving that year, I walked into Dad's house owning 2 properties. Nobody at the table had a clue. I'd bought the second one 3 months earlier, a small ranch house in the same neighborhood as the duplex. Foreclosure, paid cash from the equity I'd built, and 2 years of freelance savings. I was 28, and my net worth had quietly crossed 6 figures. At the dinner table, I sat in my usual spot, the middle between cousins, away from the head where Dad carved the turkey like a king granting portions. Aunt Patricia leaned over. Honey, are you eating enough? Your dad says things have been tough. I blinked. Things are fine, Aunt Pat. She patted my hand. That look again, the tilted head. From the head of the table, Dad raised his glass. I just want all my girls to be okay. That's all a father can ask. Brenda nodded beside him. The room murmured agreement. No one turned to me and asked, What do you say? I realized something that night, sitting in that dining room surrounded by people who loved me secondhand, through the filter of whatever Gerald told them. He'd built a complete story. In his version, I was the struggling daughter and he was the sacrificing father, and the story was so consistent, so well rehearsed, that challenging it would only make me look ungrateful. That's the thing about a lie told by someone everyone trusts. It doesn't need proof. It just needs repetition. After dinner, I stepped onto the back porch for air. My cousin Derek followed me out. "Hey," he said, leaning on the railing. "My mom's been asking questions about the money she sent your dad. For you. She says something doesn't add up." I looked at him for a long moment. "Tell her to keep asking," I said. I met Nathan at a real estate tax workshop in a hotel conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet. He was an accountant, quiet, the kind of guy who takes notes in full sentences. Halfway through the session, I asked a question about depreciation schedules for multi-unit rentals, and I caught him looking at me like I didn't match whatever picture he'd drawn in his head. After the workshop, he stopped me in the parking lot. "That question you asked, you weren't hypothetical, were you?" "No." "How many units?" "3 doors, 2 properties." He nodded slowly, like he was adjusting a spreadsheet in his mind. "Can I buy you a coffee?" We dated quietly. I told Nathan everything: the duplex, the ranch house, the freelance clients, the 60% savings rate. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix me or warn me or slow me down. One night in his apartment, staring at takeout containers, he said, "You don't owe him a performance of poverty." That sentence lived in my chest for weeks. I introduced Nathan to my family at a Sunday dinner. Dad shook his hand, then spent the entire meal interrogating him. Salary, savings, home ownership, 5-year plan. Not a single question about who Nathan was, only what Nathan could provide. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside in the hallway. "He seems nice," Dad said, "but nice doesn't pay bills." He straightened a framed photo of Brenda on the wall. "You've always needed someone stronger than you, sweetheart." Later in the car, Nathan was quiet. Then he said, "He didn't ask me one question about you. Not one." I stared out the window. "That's because to him," I said, "there's nothing about me worth asking." The lies got more specific that winter. Cousin Derek texted me a screenshot from a family group chat I wasn't in. Dad had written, "Appreciate everyone's patience. Myra's credit card situation is under control. I've been paying it down monthly. She doesn't like to talk about it." $20,000. That was the number he'd invented. I pulled up my credit report on my phone. Score, 782. 0 balances, 0 missed payments. The cleanest financial record of anyone in my family, probably including Gerald. But I couldn't walk into a room of 40 relatives with a printout of my credit score. That's not how families work. The story was already gospel. Dad had told it so many times, with such practiced sorrow, that correcting it would sound like denial. And that's when I understood the endgame. He wasn't just tearing me down, he was building a safety net for himself. If I ever succeeded, he'd take the credit. I paid off her debt. I gave her a second chance. The narrative was already written. He just needed time to let it harden. If I stayed quiet forever, he'd rewrite my entire life. The house on Maple Ridge came up in March. A 1940s craftsman cottage, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood, renovated kitchen. The owner was relocating to Arizona and priced it to sell fast. I knew the street. I knew it well. My father lived at 4708 Maple Ridge Drive. This house was 4712. I made a cash offer from the equity of my first 2 properties plus my savings. The seller accepted in 48 hours. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning. Nathan sat beside me, holding my hand the way he does, steady, without commentary. My father's house was 47 steps to the left. I didn't buy that house to prove a point. I bought it because it was a good deal, but I'd be lying if I said the address didn't cross my mind. Dad called on a Sunday morning in April, 3 weeks before my 30th birthday. His voice had that warm, generous tone, the one he uses when he wants something to look like a gift. 30 is a big deal, sweetheart. Let me throw you a party. At my place. I'll handle everything. My first instinct was to say no. My second instinct was to remember what Nathan told me once. If you say no, he'll tell everyone you're ungrateful. So I said yes. Dad went to work immediately. He ordered catering. He rented folding chairs. He sent out invitations, not to my friends but to his people. His golf buddies, his former coworkers, the neighbors who'd watched me grow up, aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides, 40 guests on the list. It was the kind of production that looked like love if you didn't know better. Brenda called me midweek, breathless. Dad's going all out. He even ordered a cake with your photo on it. Isn't that sweet? I let that sit for a moment. Who's on the guest list? Oh, everyone. Family, neighbors, some of his work friends. She paused. I think even your old boss Linda. Isn't that nice? Linda, the woman Gerald had called to sabotage me, the woman who'd nearly put me on a monitoring plan. That wasn't a coincidence. Gerald didn't do coincidences. He did chess moves. Nathan found me that night sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at the invitation Dad had mailed, to my own birthday party, with his return address on the envelope. He's not throwing you a party, Nathan said, sitting down beside me. He's building an audience. I turned the envelope over in my hands. In my coat closet, hanging on a hook, was a jacket with a set of keys in the pocket. Then I guess I'd better bring a show, I said. The day of the party, I stood outside Dad's house for a full minute before going in. The lawn was mowed in diagonal lines. A balloon arch framed the front door, silver and white. Through the window I could see the banner, Happy 30th Myra, in curly letters. It looked like love. It looked like effort. And maybe, somewhere underneath the performance, a tiny piece of it was real. That was the part that always got me. Nathan and I walked in together. The house was already crowded, people clustered around the buffet table, paper plates in hand, laughing, catching up. Dad was in the center of the living room, shaking hands, hugging women on the cheek, topping off wine glasses. But the thing I noticed first was the wall. The living room wall, the one visible from every angle of the open floor plan, was covered in framed photos. Brenda graduating college, Brenda's engagement party, Brenda's first house, Brenda and Dad at a restaurant, matching smiles. My photo was there too. One, from when I was 10, missing my 2 front teeth, holding a participation ribbon from a science fair. I looked at it for 3 seconds, then I looked away. Dad spotted me and opened his arms. There she is. The birthday girl. He hugged me. Then he stepped back, looked me up and down. My gray knit sweater, my dark jeans, my flat boots. Couldn't find something nicer? He said it lightly. It's your birthday. Before I could answer, he turned to Brenda, who stood behind him in a fitted emerald dress. Doesn't Brenda look beautiful? I got her that dress last week. I breathed. Nathan's hand found the small of my back. Across the room, Aunt Donna caught my eye. She held her purse close to her side, patted it once, and gave me the smallest nod. The party filled in like a theater before the curtain. People took seats at the long dining table, Dad's pride, a 12-seater he'd bought after Mom died, because bigger tables mean more audience. Dad worked the room. He clinked glasses. He told stories. He played the host the way he always does, loud enough to be heard, warm enough to be believed. When everyone was seated, he raised his glass. To Myra, he said, my little girl who always marches to her own drum. A few people clapped. I smiled. Standard birthday toast. I could survive this. Then he leaned toward his golf buddy Jim, seated to his right. He lowered his voice, but not enough. The acoustics of a quiet dining room don't forgive whispers. Between us, I still help her out every month. That's what dads do, right? Jim nodded solemnly. Aunt Patricia, 3 chairs away, looked at me with that tilted head pity I'd been seeing for 8 years. Jim's wife turned to me brightly. So, what do you do, sweetheart? I opened my mouth. She's in admin, Dad answered. Good solid work. Not everyone's meant for the fast lane. He winked at me, like it was a compliment. Under the table, Nathan's hand tightened around mine. I could feel his pulse, faster than usual. He was angry. I wasn't. Not yet. I was watching. I looked around the room, 40 faces, and every single one of them believed a version of me that my father wrote. The struggling daughter, the grateful recipient, the slow bloomer who needed Daddy's help. Dad stood up again, tapped his glass with a fork. The room hushed. I want to say a few more words about my Myra. His eyes glinted, and I thought, here it comes. He took his time. He always does. Gerald Lawson doesn't rush a performance. He lets the silence gather first, lets the room lean in, lets every eye find him. You know, he started, swirling his wine, when Brenda turned 30, she'd just closed on her first house. He paused for the approving murmurs. Got them. Myra? Another pause. Let's just say she's on a different timeline. Polite laughter. A few people looked down. Dad rode the momentum. His voice got bigger. She'll never afford a house. She can barely afford lunch. The laughter was louder this time. Jim slapped the table. A cousin I barely knew snorted into her napkin. Patricia pressed her lips together but said nothing. Dad spread his arms wide, grinning. But that's why she has me. Right, sweetheart? He looked at me and winked. The room waited for me to laugh along, to play the part, to roll my eyes and say, "Oh, Dad, stop." I felt the blood in my face, the heat behind my eyes. Nathan squeezed my hand so tight I could feel each knuckle. 3 seconds of silence. I looked at my father. Really looked. At the man who washed dishes in his own mother's kitchen growing up, who clawed his way to middle management, who built his entire identity around the idea that without him, none of us could stand. And I realized he wasn't joking. He needed this to be true. I smiled. Not the polite smile I'd been wearing all night. A different one. The kind Nathan recognized. The one that means a decision has been made. Actually, Dad, I said. My voice was steady. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a full room go still. About that. I didn't rush either. Since we're all here, I said, and since you brought up houses, I rested my hand on the pocket of my coat, which was draped over the back of my chair. I didn't pull anything out. Not yet. Dad laughed. The reflexive kind. The kind that fills space when something feels off. What, you got a lottery ticket in there? A few people chuckled. Not exactly. I reached into the pocket, slowly. The room tracked my hand the way people follow a match being struck. I pulled out a set of keys, 2 brass keys on a simple ring with a leather tag clipped to it. I set them on the table in front of me, gently. No toss, no drama, just metal on wood. I closed on a house 6 weeks ago, I said. The laughter died. Dad's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Brenda tilted her head, not the pity tilt I was used to from everyone else. A genuinely confused one. Wait, what do you mean? I mean, I bought a house. I looked around the table. Paid in full, no mortgage. The silence had texture now. I could hear the ice settling in someone's water glass. Dad set his wine down, carefully. The way you put something down when your hands might shake if you don't focus. Paid in full, he repeated. With what money? It was the first honest question he'd asked me in 8 years. I didn't answer it. Not yet. I just let the keys sit there, brass catching the overhead light, the little leather tag facing up, the address printed on one side in small, clean letters that nobody could read from across the table. Nobody except the man sitting 47 steps away from that address every single day. Dad recovered fast. I'll give him that. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled. A performance chuckle, the kind meant to signal that nothing has changed. Everything's under control. She's kidding. He scanned the table, searching for allies. Myra, you're kidding, right? Do I look like I'm kidding? Nathan, beside me, spoke for the first time all evening. His voice was level. She's not kidding. Dad's jaw shifted. He looked at Nathan the way you look at a locked door you expected to be open. The whispers started. Patricia turned to the woman next to her. Jim rubbed the back of his neck. Derek, halfway down the table, leaned forward on his elbows. Dad dropped his voice, trying to shrink the conversation back to size. Okay, so, where? Before I could answer, a voice came from the far end of the table. Calm, clear, unhurried. Gerald. Aunt Donna. She sat with her hands folded on the table, her purse open beside her plate. While we're clearing things up tonight, she said, I have a few questions too. Dad turned to face his sister, and I watched something cross his face that I'd never seen before. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. It was there and gone in half a second, but I caught it. Nathan caught it. Donna definitely caught it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. Not thick, but full enough. She set it on the table beside her plate and rested her hand on top of it. But Myra first, she said, and nodded at me. Go ahead, honey. Tell them the address. I picked up the keys, turned the leather tag so the printed side faced out, and in the same quiet voice I'd been using all night, I read it out loud. 4712 Maple Ridge Drive. I said it once. I didn't need to say it again. The silence that followed had a shape to it, like a held breath across 40 people at once. Dad lives at 4708 Maple Ridge Drive. Everyone at that table had been to his house. Everyone knew the street, and everyone was now doing the math. Patricia was the first to speak. That's right next to you, Gerald. Dad didn't move. His hand was still resting on the base of his wine glass, but his fingers had gone white. I continued, same tone, same pace, like reading the weather. 3 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, original hardwood floors, paid in full, no mortgage. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. Jim pulled his chair back from the table an inch, as if distance could help him process. His wife stared at me with her mouth open. Brenda shook her head slightly. You? Since when do you? This is my 3rd property, actually. I didn't say it to land a blow. I said it because the full truth was owed to a room that had been fed half-truths for 8 years. 3rd? Patricia repeated. My first was a duplex. I was 25. The second was a ranch house 2 years later. I looked around the table, at the faces that had pitied me, prayed for me, given money to my father to pass along. I've never carried a balance on a credit card. My credit score is 782, and I haven't asked Dad for $1 since Mom died. The room shifted, not toward me, away from Gerald. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't performing. I was just standing in the truth for the first time in front of people who'd only ever been given the lie. I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone. I'm telling you because someone at this table spent 8 years making sure none of you believed I could. My father found his voice the way a drowning man finds the surface. Gasping, reaching, not graceful. 3 properties. He forced a laugh. It came out wrong. Too high, too tight. Come on, who helped you? Nathan? Was this your money? Nathan didn't flinch. No, sir. This was all Myra. Dad shifted tactics. He straightened in his chair, squaring his shoulders, trying to reassemble the patriarch posture the room had always given him permission to wear. Okay, so you bought some fixer-upper somewhere. Congratulations. He waved his hand like he was brushing crumbs off the table. But you didn't have to turn my party into your party? The words left my mouth before I planned them, and the room went quiet again. You told me this was my birthday party, Dad. He opened his mouth, closed it. The slip was out, and it couldn't go back. He'd said the quiet part loud. This was his event, his stage, his audience, and every person at the table heard it. Brenda looked at Dad, then at me, then back at Dad. I watched something flicker behind her eyes. Not anger, not loyalty, something new. Doubt. From 3 seats away, Jim leaned toward his wife. He thought he was whispering, but the room was so quiet now that a whisper carried like a shout. Did you know about this? He told me she was broke. His wife shook her head slowly. I didn't react. I didn't need to. The truth was doing its own work now, filling corners, turning over rocks, exposing things that had lived comfortably in the dark. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. This is my birthday, I said evenly, and I get to decide what I share at my own birthday. I've watched my father change masks my entire life, the provider, the joker, the concerned parent, but the one he reached for now, the one he always saves for emergencies, is the victim. His shoulders dropped, his voice softened, his eyes went red at the rims. A trick I'd seen at Mom's funeral, at Brenda's graduation, at every moment when sympathy was more useful than authority. So this is what I get? He pressed his hand to his chest. I raised you. I kept this family together after your mother died. And this is how you repay me? His voice cracked. Perfectly timed. Humiliating me at my own table? He turned to face the room, slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with each person the way a preacher works a congregation. You all see this, right? I gave everything for these girls. A few heads nodded, reflexively. The old programming was strong. Aunt Patricia reached for her napkin. Jim studied his plate. And for one terrible second I felt the pull, the gravity of 30 years of conditioning telling me to apologize, to smooth it over, to let him rewrite this too. But I didn't. I looked at Donna. She met my eyes across the table, her hand still resting on that manila folder. "You gave everything?" I said. Not loud, not cruel, just clear. "Dad, let me ask you something." The room held its breath. "How much did Aunt Donna send you for my rent over the last 5 years?" The color left his face the way light leaves a room when someone flips a switch. Donna stood up, slowly. She picked up the manila folder and opened it. "I have the receipts," she said. "Literally." Donna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid it out the way a bookkeeper reads a ledger. Clean, factual, devastating. "Over the last 5 years, I sent Gerald $14,200 in personal checks. Every single one was earmarked for Myra's rent and living expenses." She pulled photocopies from the folder and spread them across the table. "Gerald told me she was struggling, that she couldn't make ends meet, that he was supplementing what I sent with his own money." She turned to me. "Myra, did you receive any of this?" "No, Aunt Donna, not a cent." The photocopies sat on the table like evidence at a trial nobody had called. Each check was a snapshot, a date, an amount, a memo line. "For Myra, rent help. For Myra, winter utilities. For Myra, car insurance." Patricia leaned forward, adjusting her reading glasses, scanning the copies. Her face changed with each one. Dad gripped the edge of the table. That was for household expenses. I used it for general." "For what, Gerald?" Donna's voice was still calm, still measured. "She didn't live with you." He had no answer. The sentence just hung there, unfinished, swinging. Derek stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, staring at his uncle. Then Patricia spoke, and her voice was the quietest it had been all night. "Gerald," she removed her glasses, "I sent you $600 last Christmas for Myra's car repair. You told me her engine was failing." Dad closed his eyes. "My engine was fine," I said. "It's always been fine." The room didn't explode. It deflated. 40 people sitting with the slow, heavy realization that the man they'd trusted, the patriarch, the provider, the voice of the family, had been pocketing their generosity and selling a daughter's dignity to fund the story. Donna closed the folder. "I'm not here to fight, Gerald. I'm here because I wrote checks to help your daughter, and she never saw a dime." I stood up, not fast, not angry, the way you stand when you've been sitting with something for 8 years and it's finally light enough to carry upright. "Since we're being honest tonight, let me be completely honest." I looked around the room, at the faces I'd grown up with, the aunts who baked me cookies, the uncles who ruffled my hair, the cousins who played tag with me in this very backyard. Every one of them had been told a story about me, and every one of them had believed it. "I bought my first property at 25, I said. A duplex on Greenfield Avenue. I was working 2 jobs and saving 60% of my income. I kept my voice even. Factual. "I bought the second property at 27, a small ranch house, paid cash from the equity I'd built. The house next door, Dad's Street, is my third." I paused. "I have never had credit card debt. My credit score is 782. I haven't asked Dad for a single dollar since Mom's funeral." I looked at the faces around the table. Some were staring at me, some were staring at Gerald. A few were staring at the floor. Every person in this room was told a different version of my life. I know, because I've heard pieces of it from almost all of you. The struggling daughter, the secret debt, the father paying it off. None of it was true. Linda, my former boss, spoke from the far end of the table. Her voice was tight. "I owe you an apology, Myra. Your father called my office. About you. I should have talked to you first." I nodded. "Thank you, Linda." Then I looked at the room one more time. "I'm not angry at any of you for believing him. He's my father. Of course you believed him." I let that land. "But now you know." My father sat down like a man who'd forgotten how chairs work. Heavy, graceless, all at once. The glass of wine he'd been holding all evening sat untouched on the table. The banner behind him still read, "Happy 30th, Myra," in silver cursive, and the irony was so thick it could have been a 5th guest at his end of the table. He looked at Brenda, his golden child, his mirror, the one who always sat beside him, who always nodded, who always agreed. Brenda was staring at her napkin. Her fingers were twisting the cloth into a tight spiral. "You don't understand," Dad said. His voice was stripped down now, no performance, no projection, just a man talking to a room that had stopped listening. "Everything I did because I love this family." I let the words exist for a moment, then I answered. "No, Dad. You did it because you needed us to need you." I didn't raise my voice. "There's a difference." He looked away. Out the window, toward the street, toward the house at 4712, which I now owned, which was dark and empty and 47 steps from his front door. He had nothing, no comeback, no redirect, no mask to reach for. Nathan placed his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Patricia got up from her chair, walked around the long table, and wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like lavender and old guilt. "I'm sorry, honey," she said against my hair. "I should have asked you." Then Brenda spoke. Her voice was small, shaking, the voice of someone pulling a thread they know will unravel everything. "Dad," she looked up, "did you also tell them I got my house because of your money?" A beat. "Because I paid you back. 3 years ago. You told me not to tell anyone." The room took another breath, and Gerald Lawson shrank a little more. The dining room had the strange hush of a place where too many truths had been spoken in too short a time. People were processing. Some stared at the table, some stared at Gerald, some stared at nothing. I sat back down. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I reached into my coat, the same pocket that had held the keys, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. My name, in my mother's handwriting, across the front. "Mom left me a letter," I said. "Dad hid the box it was in. Told us he'd thrown all her personal things away. I found it anyway." Gerald's eyes locked on the envelope. I watched recognition hit him. Not of the letter itself, but of what it meant. Helen knew. His wife, who died 8 years ago, had seen him clearly. "I opened it 2 weeks ago," I said. "I won't read all of it, but there's one part I think this room should hear." I unfolded the single page. Mom's handwriting was careful, even near the end, when her hands had been so thin the rings slid off. I read one line. "Myra, your father loves in the only way he knows, by holding on. Don't let him hold so tight that you forget how to stand. I couldn't teach him to let go, but I can tell you, you were always strong enough." Donna pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Patricia's eyes were wet. Derek looked away. Dad stared at the letter like it was a ghost. "She wrote that?" His voice was barely there. "She knew, Dad." I folded the page and put it back in the envelope. She always knew. He didn't argue, didn't spin, didn't reach for a mask. For the first time in my memory, Gerald Lawson sat in a room full of people with absolutely nothing to say, not because he'd been caught, but because the one person who understood him best had written him down, gently and precisely, before she died. I stood one last time. Not to make a speech, not to deliver a verdict, just to finish what I started. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I said. "I'm here because tonight was supposed to be about me, and it almost became another performance." I looked at the wall of photos. Brenda's graduation, Brenda's house, Brenda's engagement. My one photo, gap-toothed and 10 years old, holding a participation ribbon. "I own 3 properties. I have no debt. I built this with 2 jobs, 7 years of 60% savings, and a lot of weekends spent learning how to patch drywall." A few people almost smiled. "I'm telling you this not to brag, but because for 8 years, the story told about me in this room was a lie, and lies don't get to be comfortable anymore." I turned to Dad. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for the truth to exist in this room, even if it's uncomfortable." He didn't respond. His eyes were on the table. I picked up the keys from where they'd been sitting, still catching the light, still carrying an address that would shadow him every time he looked out his kitchen window. "The house next door? I'm keeping it. I'll rent it out. And yes, Dad, I'll choose the tenants." I let a small, quiet beat pass. Not a smirk. just the faintest shift at the corner of my mouth. Enough. The room understood. Nathan stood beside me. We didn't leave. We didn't storm out. I pulled my chair back to the table and sat down, because this was still my birthday, and I was done letting anyone else run it. Now, I said, glancing at the untouched cake in the center of the table. Is someone going to cut that, or do I have to do everything myself? Derek laughed first, then Patricia. Then the whole table, slowly, like an engine catching. For the first time all night, the laughter wasn't at me. The party didn't end. It changed shape. The table broke into clusters. Small groups talking low, leaning close, recalibrating. Some people came to me. Patricia squeezed my arm. Derek brought me a slice of cake and said, "Happy birthday, cuz. For real this time." A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years hugged me without a word. Others kept their distance. Not hostile, just recalculating. Gerald had been the axis of this family for so long that losing him as a reference point left people off balance. A few drifted to the kitchen, refilling drinks, avoiding eye contact. That was fine. I didn't need unanimous approval. I just needed the truth in the room. Jim, Dad's golf buddy, walked over to Nathan. He shook his hand firmly. "She's something, isn't she?" Jim said. Nathan's answer was simple. "She always has been." Linda pulled me aside near the hallway. "Myra, if you ever want to come back, there's always a place for you at the office." "I appreciate that, Linda. I really do, but I'm good where I am." She nodded. I could tell she wanted to say more, about the phone call, about what she should have done differently. But some apologies are better left short. Dad sat at the head of the table, alone. His wineglass was finally empty, and no one was refilling it. Brenda sat 2 chairs away, close enough to be present, far enough to be separate. She was staring at her phone, typing nothing. From across the room, I heard a neighbor, Mrs. Garland, who'd lived on Maple Ridge for 30 years, lean in to Patricia. "He told me that girl was on welfare," she whispered. "I almost called social services on her once." Patricia closed her eyes. "Oh my God." I didn't hear it as gossip. I heard it as the sound of a story being rewritten in real time. The party thinned. Coats came off hooks. Cars started in the driveway. But some people stayed. The ones who needed things settled, not just surfaced. Donna sat down across from Dad. The manila folder was closed but still on the table between them like a line drawn in ink. "Gerald." Her voice was even. No venom, no theatrics, just the voice of a woman who'd been writing checks to a ghost. "I'm not going to make a scene. Most of these folks are heading home anyway, but I need you to understand something." Dad looked up. He seemed 10 years older than he had 2 hours ago. $14,200 was sent for Myra. It didn't reach Myra. She folded her hands. "I expect it returned. I don't need it tomorrow, but I need you to acknowledge it." "It was a misunderstanding," Dad said, quietly, automatically. $14,000 is not a misunderstanding, Gerald. Patricia, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, walked over. "I want my 600 back too." Dad closed his eyes. I watched him do the math. Not just the money, the full inventory, every lie tallied, every check cashed, every dinner where he performed sacrifice while spending someone else's love. "I'll figure it out," he said, almost a whisper. Donna leaned forward. "You have 60 days. After that, I'm talking to a lawyer. Not because I want to, because I need a record." Dad flinched at the word lawyer. Not because he feared a courtroom, because the word made it real. Official. Outside the family grammar he'd always controlled. He pushed back from the table and stood. Slowly. He didn't look at me or Brenda or anyone. He walked into the kitchen where I once washed dishes alone after my mother's funeral, and closed the door behind him. It was the first time in my life I'd seen Gerald Lawson leave the head of the table. "I still love you, Gerald," Donna said to the closed door. "But love doesn't mean I let you keep my money." The back porch was cold. April in the Midwest doesn't care about your revelations. It'll chill you anyway. I stepped outside for air. The porch light was off. I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler ticking in the dark. Brenda came out behind me. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside me, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the yard where we used to catch fireflies when Mom was alive, and the world was smaller and simpler. I paid him back, she said finally. The down payment. All of it. He told me to keep it quiet, said it was between us. He told everyone he still supports you, I said. I know. She pulled her cardigan tighter. I let him, because it was easier than fighting. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Myra. You didn't do this to me. No, but I didn't stop it either. I let that sit. Because she was right. And because the truth doesn't always need softening. We stood shoulder to shoulder. No hug, no tears, but something else. A doorway that had been sealed shut for years cracking open, just enough to let light through. 3 properties? She said. I almost laughed. Took me 8 years. That's... She shook her head. Honestly, that's incredible. I had good motivation. She turned to me. I could see her processing. The years of being the favorite, the years of accepting advantages she never questioned, the slow understanding that being chosen wasn't the same as being loved. Can I see it? She asked. The house, the one next door. Anytime, she nodded. We looked out at the dark yard together. I was the favorite, she said quietly. I know that, and I'm starting to realize that wasn't a gift either. It was the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. The first week after the party was strange. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from family members I hadn't heard from in months. Some were kind. Myra, I'm so proud of you. Some were conflicted. That must have been hard for your father. And a few were the ones I expected. He's your dad, you should forgive him. I didn't respond to those. What I noticed more was the silence. The family group chat, the one I'd never been added to, the one where Dad posted updates about my fictional debt, went quiet. Derek told me nobody had posted since the party. The chat wasn't deleted. It just died, the way things die when the person who fed them stops being trusted. The ripple effects were small but measurable. Patricia called Donna to plan the next family dinner. Not Gerald. For the first time in a decade, Thanksgiving logistics didn't route through my father's kitchen. Jim and his wife stopped showing up to Dad's Saturday golf foursome. Not dramatically. They just found other plans, week after week, until the pattern became the answer. Mrs. Garland, the neighbor, left a card in Dad's mailbox. I never learned what it said. But Dad didn't wave to her from the driveway anymore. He called me once. It was a Tuesday night, raining. You've ruined me, he said. No preamble, no hello. I let the words sit. I told the truth, Dad. What you built on top of lies, that was always going to fall. Nobody calls me anymore, Myra. Are you happy? I thought about it. Really thought. I'm not happy about that, I said. But I'm not responsible for it either. He hung up. I sat in my apartment and listened to the rain and felt something I hadn't felt in years. The specific relief of a burden that belongs to someone else. Donna sent the email on a Monday. Formal, bullet-pointed. Subject line. Outstanding funds, resolution request. She itemized everything. Her $14,200, Patricia's $600. 3 other relatives who came forward after the party. Uncle Ray with $1,200 for Myra's dental work, Cousin Lisa with $800 for Myra's winter tires, and family friend Margaret with $1,400 for Myra's student loan payment. None of it had reached me. All of it had reached Gerald. Total, $18,200. Dad didn't fight it. That surprised me. Maybe he calculated that a legal dispute would cost more, not in dollars, but in whatever was left of his reputation. He withdrew the money from his retirement savings, wrote checks, sent them within the 60-day window, each one with a terse memo, reimbursement. He wasn't bankrupt, he wasn't homeless. He still had his house, his pension, his truck. But the cushion he'd built on other people's kindness was gone. Brenda started setting her own boundaries that spring. She told Dad she didn't want him discussing her finances with anyone, not relatives, not friends, not neighbors. When he pushed back, "I'm your father. I have a right to," she interrupted him. "You have the right to be my dad, not my spokesperson." I rented the house on Maple Ridge to a young couple, the Martins, both teachers. Quiet, kind, paid on time. I didn't pick bad tenants. I didn't pick loud tenants. I picked people who reminded me of Nathan and me, just starting out, working hard, saving every dollar. Every morning when Dad looked out his kitchen window, he saw their car in the driveway. A house that used to be someone else's was now mine, and there was nothing to undo about it. That spring, I ran the numbers. Duplex, ranch, cottage. My portfolio was worth just over $400,000. I was 30 years old. Not bad for a girl who couldn't afford lunch. 2 months later, I went back to Dad's house. Not for a confrontation, not for closure. I needed a box of Mom's Christmas ornaments that was still in the attic. Porcelain angels she'd collected since before Brenda was born. I wanted them for my apartment. Dad opened the door on the second knock. He was wearing a flannel shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. The house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The quiet of a place that used to echo with control, and now just echoed. He looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his shoulders sat lower, as if the scaffolding that held them up had been quietly removed. "Come in," he said. He made coffee while I climbed up to the attic. When I came down with the box, he was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs. I sat across from him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Your mother used to tell me I hold on too tight." He turned the mug in his hands. "I always thought she meant the dishes." I didn't laugh. "She meant people, Dad." He nodded, slowly. I know that now." I sipped the coffee. It was weak. He'd always made it too weak, and Mom used to add a second scoop when he wasn't looking. I didn't tell him that. I stood up and tucked the box under my arm. At the door, I stopped. "I'm not shutting the door on you," I said. "But I need you to stop lying. About me, about Brenda, about Mom. If you can do that, we can start over." Slowly. He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded, and for the first time, the nod didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a man sitting in a house that was too big for him, trying to remember how to be small. "I didn't think I was lying," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting how I needed things to be." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity isn't the same as absolution, and understanding isn't the same as forgetting. "Goodbye, Dad." He lifted his hand, half a wave. I walked to my car with my mother's angels and didn't look back. I'm sitting on the porch of 4712 Maple Ridge Drive, not because I live here, the Martins do, but today I'm here doing a final walkthrough before they move in next week, checking the paint, testing the locks, making sure the porch light doesn't flicker. Nathan's beside me, coffee in hand, leaning against the railing in that easy way he has, like the world is a place where things generally work out if you show up and pay attention. I can see Dad's house from here. 47 steps to the left. His kitchen light is on. It's always on now. He spends a lot of time in that kitchen, from what Brenda tells me. She calls me every week now. Real calls, not the surface-level check-ins we used to have, where she'd ask how I was, and I'd say fine, and we'd both pretend that was enough. "Do you regret it?" Nathan asks. "Telling everyone at the party?" I think about it, not because the answer is complicated, but because the question deserves more than a reflex. "I regret that it had to happen in public," I say. "But he made it public first, every single time." Nathan nods. That's enough for him. Donna hosted the last family dinner at her house. Patricia brought the wine. Derek manned the grill. Nobody asked Gerald to carve anything. He wasn't there. Not because he was banned, but because he chose not to come. Maybe that's his version of boundaries. Maybe it's just pride. I don't know yet. The porch light works. The locks are solid. The Martins are going to love this place. I lock the front door, pocket the key, and walk toward the car. Nathan falls into step beside me. Freedom isn't about proving them wrong. It's about not needing them to say you're right. If you're listening to this, and you recognize your own father in mine, or your mother, or your brother, or whoever in your family made you feel like you were less than what you are, I want you to know something. You don't have to buy a house to prove your worth. You don't have to own 3 properties or memorize your credit score or slide keys across a dinner table in front of 40 people. That was my path. It doesn't have to be yours. What matters is the moment you stop accepting someone else's version of who you are. For me, the keys weren't the point. They were just the proof that I couldn't be narrated anymore. The real turning point happened years before the party. The night I sat in a parking lot with shaking hands and decided that I would never again let a man who didn't believe in me define what I was capable of. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. I wasn't there for 8 years. I held my mother's letter for 5 years before I opened it. I kept Donna's thank you card in a drawer for 3. I watched my father lie about me at every holiday table and said nothing. I'm not telling this story from a place of perfection. I'm telling it from the other side of a very long silence. Dad texts me sometimes now, short messages, a photo of the backyard, a weather update. He hasn't apologized. I don't think he knows how. But he stopped lying, at least to me. And that's not forgiveness, but it might be a beginning. The Martins baked me cookies last week, by the way. Left them on the porch in a Tupperware container with a thank you note. I stood there holding warm snickerdoodles in front of a house my father said I'd never afford, and I laughed until my eyes watered. The irony was not lost on me. The best revenge isn't a house or a key or a set of receipts. It's becoming someone they can't narrate anymore. I keep Mom's letter in my wallet now, folded small, tucked behind my driver's license, where I can feel it every time I reach for something. You were always strong enough. Some days I believe it completely. Other days I have to read it again. But it's there. She made sure of that. Even from wherever she is now, she made sure. Nathan's waiting in the car. The engine's running. We're heading home. Our apartment for now. Maybe something bigger someday. Maybe one of my own properties, once the numbers make sense. I'm in no rush. I've learned that the best things I've built were built slowly, in silence, when nobody was watching. I walk past Dad's house. The kitchen light is still on. I imagine him in there, sitting at the table, drinking weak coffee, looking at his phone, wondering if anyone's going to call. Part of me wants to stop. Part of me knows that stopping right now would undo the boundary I spent 8 years building. So I keep walking. I'm 30. I own 3 houses. I have a man who sees me, a sister who's learning how to show up, an aunt who fights fair, a family that's rebuilding itself around the truth instead of around one man's need to be needed, and a father who is, very slowly, running out of stories to tell. I used to think turning 30 would feel heavy, like a door closing on the years I spent invisible. It doesn't. It feels like setting down a bag I didn't know I was carrying, like standing up straight for the first time and realizing the ceiling was never as low as someone told you it was. Nathan rolls down the window. Ready? I slide into the passenger seat. Keys in my pocket. Letter in my wallet. The whole road ahead. Ready? 30 looks good on me, but it looks even better with keys in my pocket and no one else writing the check. And that's my story. If you've ever been unseen by the person who should have believed in you the most, drop a comment and tell me. What was the moment you decided to stop letting someone else define your worth? And if you haven't reached that moment yet, you will. I believe that. Check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one.